Title: Phoenix Ascendant, The American Fire and the City Reborn. The hook: opening for USA audience. Forget everything you think you know about American grit. This is not a tale of a house fire. It is the story of an entire metropolis, the beating heart of the nation's expansion reduced to ash. On a single, terrifying night in October 1871, over 3 square miles of Chicago vanished. 16,000 buildings, factories, homes, churches, the very center of commerce were gone. 300 people died. 100,000 were left homeless. Yet less than 20 years later, in the same patch of soot and ruin, the impossible stood. The first ever skyscraper, the blueprint for every modern city you now live in, and a dazzling World's Fair that declared America's ascendancy to the world. This is the true untold saga of the men and women who didn't just rebuild a city. They invented the future in a feverish, astonishing race against time, driven by unprecedented ambition, backroom deals, revolutionary technology, and the sheer, brutal force of the American will. Their monument is every steel-framed building you see today. Their story is more astonishing than the fire itself. Chapter 1: The Tinderbox and the Spark. A substantial opening. Chicago, October 8, 1871, 9 p.m. The air was a thick, parched blanket. For 3 weeks, not a meaningful drop of rain had fallen on the plains of Illinois. The summer had been brutal, and the city of Chicago, booming, bustling, and blindingly confident, was essentially one enormous pile of kiln-dried kindling. In 1871, Chicago was less a city of stone and brick and more a testament to the speed of American industry. It was built on wood, wooden sidewalks, wooden planks for streets, wooden roofs, and in the poorer districts, entire houses constructed from pine and fir, cut cheap and fast. The central business district, the Loop, had a veneer of stone and iron, but even these magnificent structures hid wooden framing and interior partitions. The city's infrastructure, the water mains, were frustratingly small and often made of wood as well. This evening, the wind, a relentless, dry southerly, was gathering strength. It whistled down the city's grid streets, a natural, disastrous draft. Catherine O'Leary, a recent Irish immigrant, was exhausted. Her family's small barn, located in the ramshackle, tightly packed neighborhood on the city's near southwest side, housed 5 cows. Like many of her neighbors, she was asleep. The barn, a flimsy wooden structure at 137 DeKoven Street, was stacked with hay, another dry, combustible element in a city waiting to ignite. The exact cause of the fire remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. The sensational, long-debunked story of Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern, a narrative invented and perpetuated by the press for its neat, anti-immigrant simplicity, was pure fabrication. What is true is the location and the time: 9 p.m., October 8th. A small, insignificant flame began in the barn. Perhaps a careless match, a smoldering coal from a pipe, or simply spontaneous combustion in the intense heat and dry conditions. But the instant the wooden wall caught, the die was cast. The conditions were so perfect for conflagration that the barn didn't burn, it exploded into flame. The first alarm was not sounded until 9:40 p.m., a critical, fatal delay. The watchman who spotted the blaze initially misjudged its location and sent the signal to the wrong firehouse district. This was Fire Alarm Box 342, located half a mile away. When the Chicago Fire Department, a brave but grossly overstretched force of 185 men and 17 steam engines, finally reached DeKoven Street, they were already too late. The fire was now a living, breathing beast. The strong southwest wind acted as a colossal bellow, lifting the heat and flame and driving it northeast, directly toward the most densely populated parts of the city. The wooden streets and sidewalks became channels of fire. A wave of flame, estimated at a terrifying 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, began to...
Chapter 6. The Crime, the Corruption, and the Counterforce. The frantic pace of rebuilding and the huge flow of insurance and investment money were fertile ground for corruption. This period was one of intense political struggle, often pitting the ideals of the new city against the realities of political graft. The rise of the machine. The need for quick permits, swift zoning changes, and contracts for massive public works, like the river reversal project, gave rise to the entrenched city political machine. Alderman Hinky Dink Kenna and his allies became legendary figures, controlling votes and selling favors. Building inspectors could be bribed to ignore shoddy materials, and city contracts were routinely awarded to the most generous campaign donors. This corruption often directly conflicted with the architects' and engineers' demands for structural integrity and safety. The push to build faster often meant cutting corners on fireproofing or foundational work, a constant, often lethal tension in the construction process. The birth of organized reform. The city's moral and civic leaders, disgusted by the graft, formed powerful reform groups. Their most successful tool was the Chicago Civic Federation, a powerful nonpartisan watchdog. They leveraged the memory of the fire, the result of a poorly maintained, corruptly managed city, to pressure the city council. Their work led to crucial, hard-won victories. Tighter civil service reform, making it harder to hire and fire based purely on patronage. Independent engineering review boards, establishing non-political oversight for the massive river reversal and canal project, ensuring the engineering was sound regardless of the political cost. The true story of the rebuilding is thus a constant, exhausting tug of war: private ambition versus public safety, capital versus labor, corruption versus reform. The final outcome, the magnificent modern Chicago, was forged not by consensus, but by the ultimate exhaustion of these competing forces, all directed, however selfishly, toward building something vast and permanent. This continuation delves into the final critical tension in the story, Phoenix Ascendant, the American Fire and the City Reborn, detailing the growing conflict between the architectural innovators and the workers who built their visions, a necessary dramatic element for a 100,000-word historical novel. Chapter 7. The Heights of Labor and the Shadow of Conflict. Chicago, 1886 to 1892. The Shadow of the Monadnock Block. The city's rapid ascent was a marvel of industry, but it rested on the strained backs and dangerous labor of its immigrant workforce. The architectural achievements of Jenny and Burnham often obscured a profound social reality. The Great Chicago Fire had destroyed the working-class infrastructure, cheap homes, local shops, and the rebuilding created an entirely new, deeply stratified urban economy. The dangers of the vertical city. The demand for speed and height translated directly into an unprecedented risk for the workers. Construction accidents were so common they barely registered in the society pages. Rivet gangs. The iconic sound of the new Chicago was the continuous, deafening clamor of the rivet gangs. Teams of 4 men, the heater, the catcher, the bucker, and the riveter, worked together on narrow planks, often hundreds of feet in the air, heating rivets until they were cherry red, and then throwing, catching, and hammering them into the steel beams. A single slip could be fatal. The ironworkers. Many of the most skilled and highest-paid workers erecting the steel skeleton were Mohawk ironworkers from Canada, renowned for their fearlessness and ability to balance on the skeletal beams. Their presence alongside the masses of Irish, German, and Polish laborers made the construction sites melting pots of ambition and grievance. The Haymarket echo. The city's labor environment was already volatile. The Haymarket Affair of 1886, a bombing during a peaceful demonstration for the 8-hour day, had violently split the city. It empowered the industrialists, who used the fear of anarchists and radicals to justify suppressing unions and demanding longer hours. For men like Michael Sullivan, the Irish bricklayer introduced in Chapter 5, the conflict was acute. They were intensely proud of the structures they were raising, seeing them as monuments to their own skill, yet they faced wage cuts and dangerous conditions. The labor movement pivoted from demanding the 8-hour day to organizing around safety and fairer contracts. Strikes became common, often halting construction on entire city blocks. Capitalists like Palmer and Swift saw these strikes not as negotiations, but as threats to the city's timeline for the 1893 World's Fair. They responded with lockouts and the hiring of strikebreakers, often armed Pinkerton agents, escalating the...
Chapter 11. The Global Blueprint. Chicago, 1901 and beyond. The Legacy. By the dawn of the 20th century, the transformation initiated by the Great Fire was complete, and its impact had transcended American borders. Chicago was no longer just a major city. It was the global prototype for the modern industrial metropolis. The lessons it learned in fire and steel were exported worldwide. The invention of the modern office. The Chicago skyscraper and the architectural principles of the Chicago School became the blueprint for urban centers from New York to London and Shanghai. Steel skeleton frame. Jenny's innovation allowed cities to manage surging populations and increasing land values by building up. Every subsequent skyscraper built globally, from the Empire State Building to today's towers in Dubai, owes its structural logic to the necessity forced upon Chicago in 1871. Rapid transit and urban planning. The relentless pressure to move workers and goods across the newly rebuilt dense city necessitated the invention of high-speed transit. The Chicago L, or elevated train system, constructed in the 1890s, was a direct response to the congestion of the rebuilt loop. It became the model for rapid transit systems in other American cities, further defining the speed and scale of urban life. The birth of urban ecology. The city's experience with disaster, corruption, and the massive public works of the river reversal also gave rise to modern concepts of urban ecology and planning. The 1909 Plan of Chicago. Daniel Burnham, inspired by the orderly but fleeting beauty of his white city, spearheaded the first comprehensive urban planning document for an American city. The Burnham Plan, though published after his death, called for monumental civic centers, waterfront parks. Chapter 16. The Architecture of Memory and Forgetting. Chicago, 1910. The city fully realized. 40 years after the fire, Chicago had successfully managed the greatest feat of historical revision, turning a catastrophe into a foundational myth of triumph. Yet the architecture itself held the secrets of the struggle, a constant tension between memory and forgetting. The monument to the ordinary. There was no grand, singular monument erected to the Great Fire in the Loop. The city's memorial was its own rebuilt streetscape. Every skyscraper, with its steel skeleton and terracotta cladding, was a functional monument to fireproofing. The fact that the city rebuilt without a specific fire memorial was in itself a profound statement. The citizens chose to look forward, not back. However, the ghost of the fire lingered in